So while we're gathered virtually today, we're each still on land. So I'd like to take a moment to think about the land and the waterways we're on, and the land that we'll be discussing today. So we acknowledge that the town of Newmarket is located on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people, and the treaty land of the Williams Treaties First Nations and other Indigenous peoples whose presence here continues to this day. So we thank them for sharing this land with us. And we also acknowledge that the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation are our close neighbors and friends, and we work to ensure a cooperative and respectful relationship with them. So on a personal level, as a settler on Turtle Island, I'm grateful to this land and its Indigenous stewards, past, present, and future. And as a planner and engagement specialist, I know that I have a responsibility to listen, to learn, and to actively work toward reconciliation and decolonization. So thank you for listening to my personal land acknowledgement and taking a moment to consider what it means to you. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about why we're here today. We're really grateful that you all could join us today, and we'd like to provide some context and information on the outdoor rink and community space at the Ray 20 Recreation Complex. We'll gather some feedback and ideas for how a diversity of users might engage with the space, and we'll provide an opportunity to ask questions to the design team and to the staff. This is really an opportunity to hear from you, so we'll leave lots of time to keep the floor open. So I'll start with a few housekeeping notes and tips for engaging virtually. I know many of us are very familiar with Zoom at this point, so I'll keep it quite brief. You can use the chat feature to ask questions. So many of you have been doing that already. As you ask questions or share comments that come up along the way, the process team is working in the back end to make sure we've got everything captured. So even if we don't get to your question, once we get to the Q&A, we'll be noting it down and we'll make sure that you hear from us in terms of getting a response. So you can also, for those that are calling in, I'm not sure if we've got people calling in on the phone, but if you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute once we give you permission to do that. So if you're calling in on the phone, you'll be able to unmute to ask your question once we call on you in the Q&A. So we are recording this session, like you may have noticed. So that's for viewing down the road. So anyone joining or anyone who wasn't able to make it tonight can see the great conversation that we're having. And yeah, just please feel free to type your questions in the chat as we move through, and we'll get to them in the Q&A. So for our agenda, we've done some introductions and shared a little bit about what we're here for today. So after that, we'll get into some background on the project and learn a little bit about how we got to today. We'll share an introduction to the site and the program and location, and then we'll open up the floor for you and go through your questions and comments before ending at 8:30. So in addition to the folks, the project team that I've already mentioned that are here today, there is a really large team working on this project behind the scenes. So I won't go through everyone here today, but you'll see that there's a lot of teams working together to make this happen. So we talked a little bit about who we are, and now we'd love to know who you are. So we're going to launch a poll to learn about who's in the virtual room. And these responses will be anonymous, just an opportunity to learn a little bit about who you are. Has that poll been launched? Is that showing up for anyone? Okay, I'm going to keep moving. You should see the poll shortly. So I'm going to pass it on to Colin Service, who is Director of Recreation and Culture with the Town of Newmarket, to share a bit of information about the project.
Thanks, Emma. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. In 2014, the Town of Newmarket embarked on developing the Recreation Playbook. And that is our master plan. So it's a 10-year document that is intended to guide us in our decision-making around facility development, to guide us in our decision-making around service delivery, and around some of the financial matters around recreation. And through that process that began in 2014, we did an incredibly large, extensive public consultation process. We reached out to the community in so many different ways, including online surveys, including focus groups, event engagement. There was tons of opportunities, and we heard a number of things through that consultation. One of the things of most relevance today is the need for an outdoor NHL-sized ice rink. We felt that the feedback that was provided talked a lot about the need to have a place where people could actually play hockey, could participate in ice sports, that leisure skating is great and people enjoy doing that. And that Riverwalk Commons is an excellent venue for that. But those that wanted to participate in leisure skating as well as sport were finding it a little bit difficult to do so. While we recognize that this project was going to take a little bit longer than we thought, we embarked on also starting the Outdoor Community Rink projects. And so we actually have, I know Chris Howie's here tonight and Councillor Broom as well, have been instrumental in creating outdoor rinks in various wards that are community-based rinks that they meet some of that need, but we feel that the NHL size rink is critical to continue meeting those needs. We looked at a variety of locations through that process, and while that was happening, we started to learn more about the opportunities at Mulock Park. And so we considered and had initially identified Mulock Park as the preferred location for this outdoor rink. That was a very preliminary sort of assessment. Then we brought on plant architects and process who have led us through the development of the Mulock Park. And again, incredibly extensive consultation that has gone into the planning for Mulock Park. And one of the things that became very clear during that consultation was that that wasn't the right site for the outdoor rink. And so we reverted back to our original plan, which was Ray 20 Complex. And so we're now here tonight to talk about what that could look like at Ray 20 Complex, with a target opening of sometime in 2024. Next slide, sorry, thanks.
Sorry, so I guess, thanks, Colin. I guess I'll just take it from here, Emma.
Great.
So we got a timeline of sort of how we got to here, and then now we can look forward. So here's the project timeline for the actual Ray 20 outdoor rink and community space project. And we're in the early part of schematic design, and that's what we want. That's why we're here to talk to you. And we'll take your comments and continue to develop the design with the town through the end of 2022, when we plan on going to tender, and with construction beginning in early 2023. So the priorities for the design is one for recreation, an outdoor NHL-sized rink for recreational skating, has been mentioned. A public community space that's welcome to all for recreation, that's not just skating, and supports community events in all 4 seasons. Integration and respect for existing Ray 20 facility, for the existing Ray 20 facility, and especially the neighborhood, to enhance the site, to buffer noise and minimize removing trees. A welcoming space that is universally accessible, that is a universally accessible space that accommodates all abilities, considers the health of all users, and creates a safe travel through and around the site for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. Considerations for operations and maintenance, especially hours of operation, scheduling, noise, and health and safety. And consideration of timelines and process to limit disruption to the existing facility and to the neighborhood in design and construction. So a major priority of any park design or design in a park is creating a sense of safety, inclusion, and belonging. And this slide is research from that Process did, which underlines a broader understanding of what creates a sense of safety in these kinds of public spaces. It goes way beyond lighting and infrastructure, and instead considers all aspects of planning and design to support relationships, community, and fostering tolerance. And not only do not create barriers to diversity, but also to encourage it. So spaces that are inclusive are spaces that are activated, and activated spaces provide community safety. And for our next steps, as I mentioned, we will take your comments today about use of the rink in the community space and its location, and continue to develop the design based on your feedback. We then plan on speaking to you again in late summer or fall of 2022 to show you the design that we've been working on. And for an introduction to the site, the Ray Twinney Community Recreation Center and Park is central to a number of important community parks and nodes. And as the town develops and builds out its bike and pedestrian path infrastructure, as mentioned by Mayor Taylor, especially on Mulock, especially along the adjacent Ontario Hydro Corridor, it will be well connected to places like Bailey Ecological Park, Paul Semple Park, Woodland Hills, and a little further afield, Fairy Lake, and of course, the future Mulock Park. So key to the success of this project is making a new and lively focal point at Ray Twinney Recreation Center, which is a part of a system of well-loved parks and community destinations. So part of the park is also located within the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority jurisdictional zone, and contains the headwaters of Western Creek, which leads to the Holland River and eventually to Lake Simcoe. And here's a closer look at that relationship with the creek and the jurisdictional boundary to the soccer fields and to the street entrance at Ray Twinney Complex.
So Eric,
looking at elements within the Ray Twinney site, we mapped out the primary entrances and the secondary entrances, the walkways and trails, the existing parking and playing fields, and the tree buffers at the edges. And then here we looked at constraints on the site that would influence our selection of location.
Eric, the slides are jumping ahead of you somehow.
Sorry, is there an issue?
The slides have totally jumped way far ahead.
Hang on,
They're
what's
just
going
seem
on?
to be
Sorry,
going on.
I'm sorry.
They're going on
Something
automatic.
is messed up.
Yeah. You need to.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing. Yeah. Ooh. I know I'm sorry. Yeah, 1 second. Sorry, I will get back in a second. I'm trying to roll it back. The problem is it's speech falling right now for some reason, and it wasn't doing that in the practice. Okay, sorry, just bear with me, folks. Sorry about that. Oh my Lord. Is this
the life of Zoom?
I'm kind of nudging it along here. Sorry about this, folks. Bear with me. Oh my Lord, yes. Okay. We're almost there. We're almost there. Almost there. Okay. We're good. And then here we look at the constraints of the site that would influence our selection location, and oh my Lord, what is going on? Stay. And here we looked at the constraints on the site that would influence our selection of location. Major elements are the hydro corridor that bisects the site, the rolling topography in the forms of the berms, the dry water detention pond near the entrance at the front of the existing parking, and also the leased lands from the York region where the soccer field and the fire hall are located at the corner of Eagle Street and Mccaffrey Road. We also looked at the amenities on the inside of the Ray Twinney building to see what facilities could be shared between the main building and the rink. And central to our discussion today, and what we're asking for your input on, is how this space will be used. So the purpose of Ray Twinney Rink and Community Space is to have a covered outdoor activated space in all 4 seasons. So here you can see a bunch of examples of how the space can be used and programmed, and activities there will supplement programming at other facilities in the town. And in the winter, of course, it will be a rink, but also a community space that is flexible through its primary, although its primary use is a rink. If it is covered, it can be used in multiple ways, as in other seasons. The boards can be removed and the ice surface can be covered temporarily for events.
Eric, I think your deck is.
So where will the
again.
rink and community
Eric,
space
Just
be on the
jump in
site?
quickly.
Well, that's a good question. We looked at 3 possible locations.
Eric,
Site 1
Eric,
Eric, it looks
Eric?
like your deck is frozen again, and I think you may have a lag on your audio.
Sorry, are you seeing the site selections? Yeah.
yes, but it's running ahead.
I think it's running ahead. We are happy
Okay.
to share on our end. We just want to,
So what?
I will just, we can share the deck on our end, Casey. I'm just going to send it to
Okay,
you.
so maybe you should share on your end. I'm really apologize.
No problem. We're just going to share the screen on
I
the
really
process
apologize
end, and
for
then
the
you
tech
can keep going, Eric.
It was working in the practice, of course, right?
All
There
good.
we go.
Stuff happens.
Perfect.
Casey,
Okay,
are you
great.
seeing the deck here?
Yep, just sharing in one moment.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And then Eric, you can just keep going.
Glad we have a backup.
All good. We have some empathy with folks that are used to tech problems with Zoom in the chat as well. Thanks everyone for your patience. We've all experienced a lot of Zoom issues, even still, years into COVID.
So we're on slide 25, just so you know, whoever's sharing.
Okay.
Right. So location options. So where will the rink go? That's a good question. Next slide. We looked at 3 possible locations. One was in the north parking lot. Site 2 was adjacent to a much used entrance to the main building. And site 3 was in the open field at the front. Next slide. And we had a number of criteria for evaluation. We looked at the site's opportunities for supporting and programming and activating the space. Is there room for accommodating uses and making it flexible? Or in other words, what are we going to do here? And is it the best place for it? We looked at how far the location is from the neighbors and if there were features like trees and topography that could buffer it, how easy it is to access, and does it impact parking? Does it impact existing roads? Sorry, I think you just advanced the, yeah, well, can you go to back to 26? I've still not done that slide, sorry. And are there environmental impacts such as affecting the lower?
Excuse me. This is not the right presentation.
Oh, geez.
I can have it up in 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
In the old days on TV, there'd be a slide saying, "One moment, please, technical difficulties."
Emma, I need you to make me public or let me share, please.
All right, you should be co-host now.
So slide 26, Bill. There we go. Excellent. So I'm going to start the slide again, just so we make sure we cover it all. So we looked at, so we had a number of criteria. We looked at the site's opportunities for supporting program and activating space. We looked at how far the location is from the neighbors and if there were features like trees and topography that would buffer it. How easy is it to access, and does it impact parking? Does it impact existing roads and site circulation for better or for worse? Are there environmental impacts, such as affecting the lower Simcoe regional conservation lands? Visibility and views, are there good opportunities for views to and from the location? And is there any impact on possible future expansion of the main building And finally, cost effectiveness, which includes such things as distances for running services like water and electricity, or how much we need to demolish or replace pavement, or move earth around. So next slide. And next slide, Bill. There we go. And here's the analysis. The stop and go lights for each site tell the story about what we found. And when we looked at all the criteria, a clear front runner clearly emerged. The next slide. And site 3 was, site 3 was positive in every way, primarily because it not only had the best views from the location across the fields and to the location from Eagle Street, but also because it was the furthest location from the neighbors of all 3. It had excellent access to existing parking while barely impacting it at all, and has good access to the main building. Next slide. And conceptually, the location affords us elbow room for the flexibility we need for a rink and community space, shown here in pink. And there's a great opportunity to link the main door and refresh the landscape in front of the main building. And then next slide. And here's a really high level concept of what the spaces and facilities might include and how it might be expressed in the landscape. From the main entry, we would have a tree-lined promenade with a safe pedestrian crossing at the road. And the promenade leads to a plaza that adds flexibility as a spill-out space for activities. And a gently sloped lawn overlooks the plaza and the rink and the community space. And there will also be a small building that will have public washrooms, storage for the Zamboni and maintenance, and the ice making equipment will be fenced off here as well. And finally, we're proposing that the dry stormwater detention area be naturalized to reduce the need for grass cutting, encourage pollinator habitat, and contribute to the reduction of the carbon footprint of Ray 20. And as a final view, next slide. There we go. As a final view, here's an aerial of the site with the rink and community space shown conceptually in 3D and showing the relationship of the space to the existing building, the landscape, and the neighborhood. Thanks. Over to you, Emma.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. And thanks everyone for your patience with our tech challenges. We really appreciate it. So many supportive comments in the chat I was just seeing. So thank you all so much for the community energy. So yeah, I know that's a lot of information about the project at one time, but it seems like folks have some ideas and some comments and some questions to share. So thanks for people that have been putting those in the chat throughout the meeting so far. So for people who are joining the webinar through the computer, you can keep typing any questions or comments that you have into the chat, and we will get to those. And as a reminder for anyone dialing in on the phone, you can press *9 to sort of raise your virtual hand and let us know you've got a comment or question. And once we call on you and give you permission, you can press *6 to unmute yourself and share your questions. So we'll start. We may have some questions coming into the chat that we may want to address first. We've got one. Has there been any thought to include dog park facilities? The one on Tom Taylor Trail is not convenient for those of us on the west side of town, lots of COVID puppies. So we've got all the project team and the town folks here to address some of those questions. So I'll just call on them as needed. Who's the right person to talk about dog park facilities?
I can respond quickly to that if you like.
Yeah, great.
I agree with you, and I think the town and council agrees that that one dog park facility is very well used, but it's certainly not adequate for a town of our size. I would mention that there's a great one out at the Benders and Graves Park just outside of town, a really large one with dog-free trails as well that have just been established in the last month as dog-free trails, and just outside of town on Davis at Kennedy or Davis and McCowan. But you raise a good point. We're not contemplating it at this site, but we are looking at. We have established now that the new Shining Hills development will have a leash-free dog park, perhaps two, and we're looking. We've been in discussion with one developer about a site as well that might be added on. So we're actively looking to pursue more leash-free dog parks in town. We know that's something we need to do more of, and you raise a very, very good point.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor Taylor. And while I'm waiting, we've got a couple more questions that I'll read through, but I'd love to get folks thinking as well and start putting questions in the chat. We'd love to know how you currently use the rink and community space and how you use the space around that. So some things to think about that we're really curious about, or is how does your use change in different seasons? How does it change in different types of day? How do you use it? Who do you go with? Any information like that, we'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, though, I'll start to get to some questions. So we've got one question in the chat. Will there be refrigeration involved, or will you rely on cold weather for ice? So I think that's a question for Plant.
There will be refrigeration involved, and the chillers will be at the associated with that building I talked about in the one slide. They'll be fenced in around that side. Yeah.
Great. We've got a comment from S saying, yes, please, refrigerated ices would be amazing. Great. And here's another question. Has a snowdrift or wind modeling been done to factor into tree plantings? Very windy in the winter at this location.
That's a really good point, actually. That is a consideration always when we design, but we haven't done any modeling as of yet because we've just selected the location, so we're very early on in the process.
Okay, great. And another question in the chat, is there a plan to build a beach volleyball courts for the town of Newmarket? I think I'll throw that one to Colin.
Thank you. We're always interested in hearing people's thoughts and ideas. We don't have any plans currently.
Okay, great. Thanks, Colin. Someone in the chat said, I don't see a pathway from the building to site to proposed location. I'm not sure if that gives enough information to Eric.
We do have a pathway planned from the main entry to the site. I'm just wondering if they mean other sort of pathways around the site that connect to it, but we will have a connection to the main building from the community space and rink.
Okay, great. Thanks, Eric. A question from Elaine that just came in. She said, we back onto the area being considered. What kind of lighting and noise impact could be expected?
So for lighting, we do have professional lighting designers on the team, and they are charged with actually designing lighting and making sure that the lighting goes where it's intended to go, and that is in the facility and on the rink. There's also about a 200-foot buffer between the facility and the neighboring areas. There's a distance there, and then we have the topography and we have trees and that kind of thing. So we will. There's a lot of consideration that's been given to how light is going to be handled with the space. And then noise is also noise is also part of the question. Noise will be sort of as kind of part of any kind of outdoor facility where you have people playing and playing hockey and that kind of thing. But the programming itself will take that into consideration. And maybe there's someone from the town who wants to address that.
Eric, is it maybe worth noting also that we are particularly sensitive to noise and light, and that we're being careful in designing our buffers to make sure that we've got not only distance, but also good barriers where we can to help cut down on that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So I think this is a question for you, Bill. Somebody said, thank you for this informative info. When is construction scheduled to begin for this project, and when is the estimated completion date?
That's a great question. We're really, really excited to get this moving. Obviously, good design takes good time. Our expectation is that we would move forward with design so that we're ready to go to construction, hopefully when the frost is out of the ground in 2023. And the intent is that it would take about 15 to 18 months. So it would be done in 2024, we hope. Obviously, there have been a lot of different factors that enter into this. Construction is always a little unpredictable, but those are our ambitious targets right now that we'd love to see happen.
Great, thank you. And then I think this is another one for you too, Bill. This is relating to costs. So somebody said, I know there's some money raised already. Do we know how much sustainment costs will be over time, even in comparison to other jurisdictions with similar facilities? And what future upgrades and maintenance will be required in 5 or 10 or 15 years to ensure this is a successful investment? Great question.
That's a really good question. So if we could break it into two parts, in terms of construction cost, we're still very much in the design phase and making sure that we're doing this in a way that is cost sensitive and that we get good value for money. We're hoping to have more information on that later in this year as the design advances. In terms of operational cost, the town does have a process for looking at that we're growing right now. That said, maybe that's something that Mark or Colin would like to speak to further.
Mark,
I'm not sure if you're speaking, you're muted.
I would, sorry, I just wasn't sure if Colin was going to start there.
Okay.
yeah, no, I was opening the floor for you, Mark. Go right ahead.
Okay. From an operational standpoint, we obviously during these processes look at sustainability and cost efficiencies, not, as Bill indicated, just not in the build itself, but in the operational long-term plan. So the type of equipment that we use. And I just want to reassure everybody too as well that there's components in the operations itself, like an electric Zamboni, and how that is much quieter than standard Zambonis from the past. So from an operational standpoint, we also look at the sustainability piece and the value piece on how we can operate this as efficiently as possible.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Great. And we've got lots of more questions coming in. I'm going to pass it to another one shortly. I'd just like to say too, feel free to share any insights that you do have around how you use the space currently, and how you might use the future space. So we'd love to hear any ideas from you in the chat as we keep moving through so that we can collect as much kind of user feedback as possible. But for now, I'm going to throw it to a question about accessibility. So someone has said, I know this might be in the weeds, but you did talk about increased accessibility to all. So what does that actually look like with a variety of stakeholders who will be interested in using the facility, especially when it's brand new? Will it be free? How will it be booked? Yeah, these are great questions that we definitely want to think about. I think I'm going to throw it to Colin. Is that one for you?
Sure. So there's a lot of different aspects and dimensions of accessibility. There's obviously the physical aspects of accessibility, which are being very, very carefully thought about through the design. And so I'm not going to speak a lot about the physical aspects of accessibility because I think we're on a really good path to make sure that that's there and very important in the design. But from a financial standpoint, from a social standpoint, we're not 100% sure how we intend on operating this in terms of programming. But what I will say that we do know is that we anticipate operating it in much the same way that we would all of our other outdoor rinks. Currently, you don't pay to use any outdoor rink when you're a member of the public coming and skating. And that's very much how we intend on moving forward with this, that when we have leisure skating opportunities, that those would be offered at no charge, that we may have specific shinny type opportunities. Again, it would be low to no cost. And we don't anticipate this being a heavily booked facility by user groups. Instead, what we anticipate doing is making our indoor spaces more accessible to the user groups, and some of that programming that we currently have indoors, we would migrate to this site. So things like public skating and shinny hockey and those kinds of things, those kinds of open access. It doesn't mean that user groups never will be able to book it. And those are just some very preliminary thoughts, and we will move forward as we get closer to an opening date with a more direct and concrete operating plan. But those are some initial thoughts.
Can I just add one thought to that as well, please? Agree with Collins, I think capture everything really well. The one other thing that is partially speaks to the next question but is that I think throughout this process, I've had preliminary conversations, and it's been some time now, but preliminary conversations with potential fund donors to some aspects of of this, and that can speak to accessibility in the physical sense. But the other part is, I'd like us to explore through this is the possibility of having the availability of skates, either low cost rental or free, so that people who are, the lower income families, people who want to try sport for a first time but don't want to invest heavily in equipment or just in skating. So I think that's something we'll be exploring along the way too, is possibly having some sort of skate program on site.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Taylor and Colin. And yeah, I can see in the chat here, we've got a lot of different ideas around what would make the venue, exciting, what people want to do there. So feel free to weigh in on the chat too, like what would make it accessible for you? What does that mean for you in terms of use? How might you like to use the space? It'd be great to hear that from you. Another question, I think this one is for Eric. Will there be safe pedestrian access from Mccaffrey from Alex Donor? Right now there isn't.
Right, that's a really good point. Right now, the scope of our project is within just from the main entrance to where we've decided where the location is going to be. But we can certainly keep that in mind as part of the, as perhaps part of the future part of the project.
Sounds good, thank you. We've got a question around construction time. And so would the use of existing facilities be restricted during construction? I think that's for you, Bill.
I can take a first stab at it, and Eric may want to expand on it. I think our intention would be with a facility like this that as much as possible, we are minimizing the impact on existing facilities. Anytime you have construction, there might be some short-term interruptions, but we would try to plan the work to minimize that. And it's something we'd know more about as the design advances, and that we would build right into our design to minimize those impacts as much as possible.
Yeah,
Eric, I don't know if you'd like to add.
Sure. Yeah, one of the benefits of this particular location is that it has a good access to the main building, but it's just kind of remote enough that we can actually keep Ray 20 operating at current sort of capacity, and not disrupt any operations there.
Okay, great. Thank you both. I just want to take a moment to notice we've got a lot of excitement about roller skating in the comments. I'm not sure if that's something that is being explored. It seems like people are really excited about that in terms of alternative access to the space. That's great. We've got a lot of questions as well on parking. So is there any expansion in parking? How about on holidays? How will that look?
Currently, there's no anticipated changes in the parking numbers. The location that we have right now is actually is outside of the parking areas, and the parking doesn't really have to change.
If I could also add to that, right now, Ray 20 actually has an abundance of parking in comparison to most facilities of this nature. The one challenge is that sometimes the parking isn't close to the activity you want. So during the pool itself may be busy. So one of the things that we can look at in improving is the directional signage of where you can park and enter. The Ray 20 has a lot of different entrance points and a lot of different parking points. So we can look at improving directional signage to direct people where alternative parking could be, but there is a surplus of parking there currently.
Great. Okay, thank you both. And I just want to take a moment. I know you got a lot of questions coming into the chat to let people know, remind people that we are capturing all of the questions and comments that are being shared. And they will be shared back in the form of a summary where you'll see responses if there are any that we don't get to tonight. So thank you so much for all of those. We've got a lot of questions coming in around different uses and different times. So one of them, I think this one is for Eric or Mark, is are there any plans for dressing rooms or change rooms? Didn't see that in the plan.
So there are no plans for dressing rooms or change rooms at the rink. However, I think there are plans to possibly share the facilities in the main building, but I think Mark someone may have to.
Sorry, I was going to say. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say, because there's also another question that's sort of related to this is, will there be, a place to buy hot chocolate? And one of the thought was that the building is very close by and has change rooms that are close by and also has concessions that are close by within the building, which is one of the reasons why we have quite a large promenade to connect the Ray 20 facility and the new facility.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that as well is that on the times that we actually have programming where change rooms may be required, we definitely can incorporate use of change rooms within the facility, or even some of the lounge spaces within the facilities, those kinds of things. But recognizing that the goal is to really not be permitting it all the time, but rather have sort of more open access programming. We felt the change rooms was as an expense that we didn't want to incur.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And tying back to the comment about roller skating and uses, so how will the facility be used in the summer? What do we know about that so far? Is that for Colin or for Eric, maybe?
Colin, maybe?
What we believe is very important is having a roof structure. The roof structure allows it to be used for a variety of different ways. And so part of the design also is contemplating removal of the boards and the ability to remove those boards. So you could almost imagine it as a large scale pavilion that could accommodate any kind of number of events. We would also look at using it for any kind of sport and recreational programming opportunity that might emerge. Like it's a very much being designed as a blank slate that allows us to use it in a variety of different ways, depending on how the community sees it, the need emerging.
And it will be designed to be flexible, so if it's a rink, the boards can be removed. It can become a large open space. It's covered, so you're out of the elements during the summer if it's raining or if it's kind of inclement outside. So.
Great. Okay, sounds good. And someone else would like to know, will there be stands to watch ice activities?
It's currently not planned to have stands at the facilities. There may be some seats surrounding it, but it's a very kind of informal facility where where it's mainly about community access and community activity, and not necessarily formalized sports.
The other component that I think is worth mentioning too, that is that we wanted to have it designed in such a way that we could bring in temporary stands in the event that there were like a special event that would require that. So if we had a large scale game or tournament of some kind or something like that, we'd have that ability to bring in those temporary seats when necessary.
Yeah, there was some input I was going to offer even around that at some point, but I think that in the design, we need to think about the ability for people to even informally access the outside for when there is something that maybe isn't a major event. But so when you look at the design currently, and I know we're very early stages, but it appears there's only certain areas that are more amenable to that. And so I think thinking about how people can stand around and enjoy and watch and cheer, and maybe even a space for enhanced seating on occasion, I think is a really good point.
Great, thanks everyone. We've got a question about grading. So have you looked at the grading? There's a slope down from the road that little kids can sled on, in the winter. So Eric, I think that's a question for you. And if you wouldn't mind explaining too, like, what is grading?
So what is grading? And the grading is where we take into consideration the topography of the site. So sort of hills and rolling hills and that kind of thing. And currently where this location is, it's a little bit of a dip. It's a bowl because it's a dry weather storage facility for stormwater. Yeah, has great slopes it would have great slopes for tobogganing. I think the hills there are maybe about 30 or 40 feet high. Right where the location is the moment, we will have to elevate the grade slightly to get out of the when it does rain and that fills up, we don't want the rain going into the facility. However, there will still be ample slope and berming in that area just for that, for that very activity.
Okay, great. Thank you. And this is another question for you. Can you use recycled materials to reduce the environmental impact?
We like to take that approach. The thing about this particular site is that it's pretty much all grass, so there's not much to actually recycle. If we were maybe in one of the parking areas where we're tearing up concrete or paving, that would be a consideration. But recycled stuff from the site, there won't be much of it. And then when we specify materials, we do like to specify things that are recycled, or if they're at the end of the use, they can be recycled, but that will certainly be a consideration.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, just to kind of add on, because I think, the root of that question is, what are the sustainable things that may be done on the site as part of this project? And so, some of the things we've talked about is the fact that when you have a roof over a skating rink that is cooled, that you actually there's less cool lost from the sun because it's actually covered. So it's actually a much more efficient way of efficient use of energy to actually cool the skating rink. There'll be the kind of approach to the area around it is something that is going to manage the stormwater in a kind of low impact way, which is really also really important. Electric Zambonis are kind of changing the kind of machinery that get used in the project. So there's a number of different ways, not just the kinds of materials we use, but all the considerations in terms of design throughout the project.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And I've got a grouping of questions kind of around, the journey from putting on our skates to getting into the rink. So I'll read a couple out together and then maybe we can answer them together. So one question is there a sheltered space for putting on skates? Somebody says they use the river walk rink frequently, usually around 4 to 6 times a week, and like the flexibility to go at any time. But sometimes it's hard to find a good space to put your bag while on the ice that doesn't take away from seating of other people that are trying to put their skates on. And someone else has asked, will lockers be available to store belongings? And someone else has said, are there rest areas to sit around the rink? A lot of people wondering about that. Is that for you, Eric?
I'll address the rest areas. Yeah, there's going to be ample space around the rink and opportunities for seating around the rink and in that plaza space I was talking about, as well as on that lawn that's associated with it. So the idea is to activate the space, not just within the rink, but outside the rink and around the rink, and to keep the area active and community oriented. Lisa, do you want to address the other portion of that?
Yeah, I think as we develop the shape of the roof, part of that will include, how far it goes and covers areas that are not over the ice rink, so that it can provide some shelter for getting your stuff on and off. Storage, of course, for bags will be considered. Lockers we haven't really gotten to that kind of detail yet of exactly what you're storing your bag in or on or under, but it's very top on our list of the things that we need to consider as we are looking at that small building and its sort of interface with the actual facility.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And while we're talking about the roof, I'm going to jump in with a couple of roof questions we've got in here. Dave says, can you talk about the roof? Very happy that a roof is going on. Is the plan to have a roof that lets the light in or through?
So we haven't designed the roof yet. So the image that you saw in the last image of the last slide was showing a kind of curved something. You know, the most important thing for us was to actually find the place for the facility, and then we can start to develop the shape of the roof to take into account the kind of best views on the site, the best orientation on the site. Someone brought up earlier wind. There may be aspects of the roof that are reacting to that, or let's say defending the space from that. And really taking advantage of, or thinking about what the experience of arrival is as well. So those are all the things that kind of all the ingredients to kind of put in the pot that we will use to start to develop what the roof is. In terms of how much light should or should not come through, that's also something that we are discussing with the town. There are advantages to having more light coming through in that you need fewer lights just because you're taking advantage of sunlight. And we also know that sunlight melts ice. So we have to think about winter, summer, all 4 seasons, all of these things. So those are, like I said, the ingredients in the pot, but it's not cooked yet.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, and we're getting actually lots of interesting questions and ideas on the roof. Chris says keeping direct sunlight off is key. So an arc roof that lets the snow slide off is really key. We've got a question from Steve that says, are you considering solar panels on the roof? That's an interesting idea. It is. I don't know if you'd like to say that, Lisa.
No, I was going to say it's something that's it was on the list for discussion as well. That's yeah.
Okay, great. And just one last roof question before we move on to another piece for now. Deborah says, does the positioning and design protect users from winter winds and summer storms?
That will be a design consideration for sure. We have the like we're saying, we have the location, and that's kind of the next step is looking at all these things, looking at all these things in context. Yeah.
All right, great. So another question we've got is about staffing. So can we expect that there will be staff on site to ensure cooperation with, you know, multi-uses and different things going on? I'm not sure. Is that a question for you, Colin?
It is, yeah. And I think it's a bit early to say whether or not it would be totally staffed or not. I mean, we would definitely not be staffing it at all times, but there could be peak periods where we look at staff. But a lot of it will depend on the programming that happens. But definitely want to make sure we create an environment that's safe and welcoming for people.
Great.
If I could just to add to that too,
yeah.
You know, given its proximity to our existing facility, much like the community center, it's something that would be, you know, monitored by staff operating in the building should there be any concerns or issues on the site. So, you know, as Colin indicated, it's something we'll work through, but given existing staff already at the Ray 20 complex, there'll always be somewhat of an eye on the place.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we've got a follow-up question from Ian who says, what are the other aesthetics being considered? So that's for you, Lisa.
I think the one thing that we, of all of those things, like I said, all of the ingredients of the things that we don't know or that we're going to consider, but there is one thing that has been, that is in our mind, which is that it will make a statement. The idea is that it's a destination and that it's, you know, going to have this quality of statement to the backdrop of Ray 20. Exactly what that looks like is the next PIC.
And the location itself was chosen just because it has there is a significant view from Eagle Street, and it has a prominence on the site. So making a statement has to make a statement.
coming from, yeah, exactly. So coming from the road, you sort of get these kind of sweeping views of it. So it's got this incredible opportunity as a destination place.
Great. Ian says, thanks. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, and we've got a couple of great ideas coming in around ideas for uses. So somebody says, how about improving the playground on site as well? So families with kids who are not on the ice can also use an attraction. And another idea is, what about a running or walking track outside of the rink's perimeter? Parents need to keep warm too.
Those are all great comments.
To jump in, but they're, yeah, great ideas. Go ahead, Eric.
I think when it comes to improvements to the rest of the facilities, I think that's something we can take note of, and I think we have the facilities and people here who hear that. It's not currently part of the project, but it's definitely something that can be taken note of. And the track run on the outside, that's a really good comment. Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I'll just say again, we've got lots of great ideas coming in the chat, and I won't read them all out in terms of uses and ideas for experiences, but they are all being noted down, and we're excited to take them back and discuss them with our team. So a question for Colin. We've got a question that says, once the facility is open for use, will other outdoor rinks in Newmarket continue to be supported by the town?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We have no intention of reducing those services in any way.
Okay, great. Thank you. And here's a question. Once usage rates are established, will public transportation services increase to the location during peak usage times? Is that one for Colin as well?
I wish I had that kind of influence with York Region Transit, but that is a separate organization, and we're always able to have conversations with them. But that is a decision made by York Region Transit.
Okay, great. Question for York Region Transit. Good to know. Thank you. So since this location is below the existing roads and buildings, will there be problems with noise rising above these areas? So a couple of different questions on noise. We've spoken about that a little bit, but maybe that's for Eric or for Bill.
Just to talk about the design a little bit, the location, of course, is 200 feet away from the neighbors. It's probably the most optimal location in terms of distance from any one of the neighbors around the site, around the Ray 20 complex. There are significant tree buffers. There are significant sort of berms on flanking both sides of this, and it's going to be somewhat nestled. It's not going to be at the bottom of that slope. I just want to make it clear, it's going to be raised a little above the bottom of that slope, but it will be buffered by what is around it. So we're sensitive to the idea that there will be noise, some noise generated by this, and we're going to do our best to mitigate that.
Great. Okay, thanks, Eric. I see that we've addressed most of the comments that are coming in. Thanks so much, everyone, for your comments and your questions. We really appreciate it. Some new questions coming. So Melanie says, will the filling to make the level location impact the soccer field?
Short answer is no. We want to keep the fields that are there because they're valuable, and they currently function the way they're supposed to.
Great. Well, okay, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your comments and your questions. We really appreciate it. We may not get to 8:30 if we've addressed everyone's questions, but we've heard a lot about user experience and kind of different questions around what the next steps and the process will look like. But is there any other feedback that people would like to share on what kind of advantages they see for what we've presented today, or any kind of suggestions for improving this project? We'd love to hear any thoughts that you might have on that in our last couple of minutes. Jenny says, I wonder in the summer if we could use the surface for ball hockey. That's a great idea. Yeah, we're looking forward to compiling all of the ideas shared around different uses. Go ahead, Lisa.
Just to you know, to make the ice rink in the winter, you have a hard surface in the summer. So everything that you can imagine doing on a hard surface, you know, on wheels or with balls or markets or, you know, any kind of community get together. It's just a big hard surface that you can actually access and enjoy when it's raining. So anything you can imagine is you can do. Yeah.
Great, lots of possibilities, and yeah, feel free to throw in any final ideas that are coming to mind for you in terms of how you might use this exciting flat surface with lots of opportunities. Chris said it could also be used for skateboarding to provide another location beside Magna. Definitely. We've got concerts, box lacrosse. That's great. Hoping that the surface will be airy so that, you know, festivals could be there. How about, so someone has wondered about, you know, weddings. Will there be opportunity for that type of booking?
Sounds like Colin.
I think it's fair to say that we don't want to remove any opportunities today. That actually we will be working closely with the community about what works in that site.
Great. Okay, great. We've got some other ideas coming in. Elaine says, just an FYI, the distance and trees do not buffer the sounds of the fields being used for soccer in the summer, events with speakers. So be mindful as we're talking about festivals. That's a great point and something that will be considered. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say on that.
No, but we're sensitive to that. Yes, thanks. So thanks for the comment.
Okay, perfect. And Cassandra says, aside from this section, which is great, what other consultations have happened or will happen, especially with local clubs or groups? Great. So this is kind of a great way to end our meeting, and there are some moments for some more questions after this, but there will be another meeting later in the year to talk about the next phase of the project. So there will be another public meeting just like this one, where we'll share where we're at in the next phase of design, and we'll share more details for that once we know the date and more information, and definitely keep you in the loop. There are also, you know, other ways to stay involved. So I'm just going to type in the chat right now. I'll just drop it in the chat here, the website that you can check out to stay in the loop about project updates. And you can also join a mailing list by reaching out to info@newmarket.ca. So we'd definitely love to have you all staying in the loop of the project as we move forward, and continuing to give feedback as we get into the next phases.
Emma, can I just add on to that, or just around the user group component? So just for those who are here on behalf of user groups or sport organizations, I do want to stress that we make it a priority to meet with those user groups regularly at the start of each season, but even throughout the season, to talk about what their needs are from an ice standpoint. And we will continue to do that. And this will be another element that will be part of those discussions.
But Colin, if I could, sorry, but specifically, I think you're saying that, but specifically, there will be either staff or plant will have some contact with major user groups just to get a sense of their thoughts and ideas and dreams for this site that are specific to their membership. Is that fair to say? Not that we can accommodate everything, but they would have probably some unique insights, perhaps, to the kinds of uses or some of the things their groups have done in outdoor settings before. Or is that going to be part of the process?
Well, I think the next PIC where we actually look at design elements is we will definitely encourage all of those user groups to be a part of those design discussions. for sure.
Great. Great. And we've just got some thank yous in the chat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming out tonight and sharing your feedback and excitement about the project. It's great to hear what everyone has to say about how they might use the space and all the helpful considerations. We really appreciate it. And we hope to keep you in the loop moving forward. So we've got some people asking to stay in the loop with the process. And so we will be posting the summary of the meeting where we do gather these ideas and insights. So you can see those and see responses around how we've answered your questions. And we'll share more details about the date of the next PIC when we do know. But thank you so much. And thank you for your patience with our tech challenges.
Yes.
We really appreciate the community support. So thank you. All right, great. Well, thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.